G'day guys, welcome to Red Time ahead of a massive weekend of footy. I'm your host, Jarryd Barca, and Jake Michaels is not with me today. He's over in Paris pretending to be sophisticated while he sips some espressos and eats some croissants. But we do have you, Matt Walsh, filling in for the next couple of weeks. Thanks for being here.
Happy to be here. Bit of a disservice to Jake because he is actually working over in Paris.
He's covering the Olympics. Yes.
He'll be a very busy man, no doubt, but do keep track of his stuff, espn.com.au, throughout the Olympics because he's working very, very hard.
He is. Am I right in saying this is your first time in the studio not hosting, though?
No, maybe.
I reckon you've hosted every time.
I've been on Red Time with you, but might have been on Zoom.
Just on Zoom, though.
Yeah.
So back in the hot seat, but maybe not behind the wheel today. We do have a big episode ahead, and we're going to get it started looking at Carlton, your blue baggers. Walshy, can Carlton still win the flag if they don't finish top two or, in extension, lose this week?
Yeah, this week's massive for the Blues because the Lions are right behind them, just 2 points behind them. So there's going to be none of this sort of like fight for percentage come the end of the season. But Carlton is kind of the hunted at the moment. It's not just the Lions. Obviously, the Dockers are right there as well, 46 points, 2 points behind the Blues as well. But I'm looking at the Lions run home and then the Blues run home, and I'm thinking the Blues one is tougher. So they're going to have to keep winning, which is, worrisome if you're a Carlton fan, being sort of, I guess, the front runner and trying to protect your back. So Lions, obviously, away to the Suns, which hasn't historically, this year at least, been easy for teams to go and win at People's First Stadium.
It's a tough game.
It is a tough game, but I feel like the Lions are good enough. Then they've got the Saints away, they've got the Giants at home, the Pies away, and the Bombers at home. Whereas Carlton obviously Port Adelaide this week, then the Magpies and Hawks at the MCG, West Coast away, and then St Kilda to finish. So I don't know. I think Carlton probably, to win the flag, probably does need to finish top two, because if they don't, the two teams below them are interstate sides, which means they'll have to travel in the first week, which puts a lot of pressure in a qualifying final, and then they might be in the semi, and I don't know. I think that Carlton's premiership chances really hinge on this week in particular, because Port is a massive banana peel, and it could be the end, I guess, of their top two hopes.
Yeah, I'm still sort of 50-50 on Port Adelaide. I've done a few ladder predictors. I haven't done one this week, but I did have Carlton winning out for the remainder of the season. I think
you're more confident in the Blues than me.
I think they're just better than the teams that they're playing against, but there's no such thing as an easy game, and you're right. If they do lose one against the Hawks or Port Adelaide or Pies in Pendlebury's 400th, it wouldn't be a shock, but I still think Carlton can lose a game and still finish top two. It just means the Lions would have to lose one somewhere as well.
And the Dockers would have to lose one as well. So yeah, tough ask for the Blues, but look, if they keep it in their control, it's by winning out.
I did have a quick look at this just before we started. There have been 16 times since 2000 that a team has made the grand final from outside the top two, and last year it was the top two teams, Brisbane and Collingwood, but that was the first time that's been the case in the grand final for 9 years. So there are times where teams can come from outside of the top two, but obviously it makes Carlton's job a lot easier, especially when you're the only Victorian team in the top four, as you mentioned. Not having to travel to take on a Sydney or Brisbane in a prelim is going to make a huge difference.
Yeah, you'd much rather have the bird in the hand, so to speak, and finish in the top two and have sort of destiny in your own hands, that's for sure. Jarryd, will you be concerned about the Swans and their premiership credentials if they lose to the Dogs this week? It would be 4 losses from their past 5 games if they were to succumb.
Sort of. I want to say yes, but it's almost premature. It would be yes, but not because they lose to the Dogs. If they do go down this week, it's because they're losing to a pretty good football team. And a couple of months ago, the Dogs did pretty well at Marvel Stadium and were probably stiff not to be closer or to actually win that game. So the concern would be, or for me, what I'm looking at is how they actually cover their injuries. You've got Papley that's out for the rest of the home and away season. Dane Rampe is going to miss a couple with a calf as well. And if there's one team that you don't want to be undersized against in your defence, it's probably the Dogs. Carlton would be one. But the Dogs as well with Norton, Ugle-Hagan and Darcy up there as well. Tom McCartan does his job, and Lewis Malikan's probably undersized, but Rampe usually plays taller as well. I think that's where the worry has always been for Sydney. They've been fit this season. They've had a pretty healthy list, which you need to be lucky with, and I think they've been blessed. You look at their key forward stocks with Amadi, McLean and McDonald. They've been there all season, which is a good thing for them. But I still think they need all their defenders fit and firing for finals. So this is a pretty good test for them to not have someone like Rampe there against a pretty tall forward line. That's not to say I don't think they'll win. I've tipped them. I think they will win. But for me, it just depends on the way they lose if they lose.
Yeah, I mean, their losses this year, cumulative sort of 10 points. So we're not talking about disastrous kind of stuff. And we talked about it on Tuesday, Jake and I, where we were sort of saying that, a lot of the processes and the way that they're being beaten is just not a style that holds up in finals.
Yep.
And for the Swans to have banked the wins and be in the position where they are, where they will likely, and it something would have to go drastically wrong for them to miss out on a top 2 spot now. I just can't see that being a problem, and I'm not concerned for them at all. And every team has, dips and troughs and peaks and all that kind of stuff. And I feel like the Swans can sort of come out the other side of it before finals.
Their midfield has been so dominant that it probably hasn't mattered that they don't have a lot of key defender stocks. And they probably know that internally in the club as well. It's why they've probably honed in on that midfield strength this season as well. But they could win this week and it expels any of those concerns anyway. One for you. Who is the coach of the year after 20 rounds of footy?
Good question. A few candidates. Obviously, probably a month ago, you could have said John Longmire was right up there. I think Justin Longmuir to get his side to where Fremantle is after their pre-season expectations and I guess the start of the season could be up there. But I think Sam Mitchell, for me, it has to be. After losing his first 5 games, the Hawks have gone 10-3 in that time, which is quite an incredible performance. But not only the wins, but just sort of the energy around the club. It's been transformed and players look invested and passionate, which I think when you're a supporter of a side that is in the build mode, I guess, not quite sort of at the bottom or, the other side of the bottom, but, it's going to be a bit of a slow going. To be having your players sort of invested and the way that they look like they are energised around the club is so important. And I think that Mitchell has a lot to do with that. And if I was a Hawks fan, I would be thrilled with what they've been able to put out this year, and I think he's my coach of the year so far.
I would agree with you. To be 0-5, I think that was 17th or around 16th, 17th after round 7 or 8, and to win 9 of your last 11, that includes losing to Port Adelaide by a point where they were 2 goals up with 30 seconds to go.
Correct.
So yeah, you're right. He's got them playing a pretty distinct style of game, and when you're all on the same page, playing all to the same system and just enjoying your footy, which they clearly are, makes it exciting. But the mood in the club would go a long way to the way that they're playing at the moment as well. And Sam Mitchell has a lot to do with that. They win the ball first. They're fast. They're quick. They don't muck around with it, and they're pretty efficient when they go forward as well. He's got them playing some exciting footy. But yeah, I think at this stage it's pretty hard to go past Sam Mitchell from where they were to now be contending and looking at playing finals. It's a pretty big result.
Sticking with the Hawks, James Sicily plays game 150 this week after being taken at pick 56 in the 2013 National Draft. Is he the biggest draft steal of the last sort of 10, 11, 12 years?
Yeah, so he's up there, and I have looked at this. Firstly, 150 games. I did think he'd actually played a lot more than that.
Yeah, he missed a year with a knee.
Yeah, missed with a knee. Probably didn't play straight away as well. He started as a key forward and probably didn't cement himself in the team as early as he could have. So I looked at this, and we're looking from 2013 onwards, that being the last decade, and that being his draft, obviously. That draft alone, you had Alex Pearce at 37, Tom Barrass at 43, Sicily at 56. Carl Amon's not the worst pick at pick 68 as well. He's also at the Hawks. 2014, you had Bailey Dale and Caleb Daniel go back-to-back at the Dogs in the 40s. Andrews was 61, but he was an academy pick, so always tied to the Lions, I guess. Jordan Dawson picked 56 the following year. Luke Ryan, 66. Nick Larkey, 73. Both from the 2016 draft. I think they're the ones that I'm focusing on here. So there were a lot of good picks in the 20s and 30s, but when you got Sicily at 56, Dawson at 56, Luke Ryan at 66, and Nick Larkey at 73, I think they're the 4 that you can probably make an argument for, but it's his 150th. So I'll say James Sicily is the biggest steal of the last 10 years. I just think key defenders are so valuable, and for what 56 is worth, to get someone like him, who Jake rated as a top 10 player coming into this season, and him now being the captain of the club, I'm happy to say Sicily is the biggest steal. You're
taking liberties, I think, with the last 10 years, because 2013, it's currently 2024. I know there have only been 10 drafts, but if you're talking 10 years, it has to be Nick Larkey. I think we talked about this on Tuesday with forwards turned defenders and how it seems to be a bit easier to play key defence than intercepting defender. And Larkey, as a key forward, taken at 73 in the 2016 National Draft. He's an All-Australian. He's a 3-time club leading goal kicker. Kicked 71 goals last year in a really, really poor club and has years and years ahead of him. I'm going to go early and say that Larkey is definitely the biggest late steal of the draft. That is for sure.
Pick 73.
It's not bad, is it?
It's amazing. Moving on, should Ray Chamberlain move full-time into media now he's retired from umpiring? To make the connection between the AFL fans and umpires better?
Great call. I think it's an absolute no-brainer, whether the AFL facilitates it, whether Ray facilitates it himself, whether media companies go after him. Should we drop an email into Ray and get him on for a podcast every week?
We'll do it when we're done.
Okay, we'll do it when we're done. But I think that's an absolute no-brainer because he is media savvy. We know that. He goes on radio every now and then and loves to have a chat, and he's a very approachable guy. He's a well-known figure as well. So I guess to kind of have a connection between the AFL, the rules, the umpiring department, the fans and the media, I think that's exactly what the AFL sort of landscape is missing right now, because there's that sort of vacuum of information, between all of these stakeholders in the game, and that's where a lot of the confusion seems to be coming from a lot of things this year. So I'd be absolutely, maybe we'll talk to the boss after this and get Ray on a podcast.
The only thing I would say is fans aren't going to care because fans are fans. Fans are stubborn. They're biased.
Fans like it.
They think what they think. But you're right. I think the insights that you can get from someone and the transparency to get those opinions from someone who has coached the game at the highest level for 20 plus years, I think that's going to be beneficial to a lot of people. And I've been on the record on this podcast saying that I think the biggest issue with umpiring in general is actually fans and sometimes commentators not actually knowing the rules properly. So to have that transparency, as I said, I think it's fascinating, but I think it's quite beneficial as well.
And no offense to this person who obviously does great work on Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, other platforms, but has stuffed up Twitter account. You can't be relying on this person. And look at the engagement that they get. Of course, the fans want to know.
It's a good sign.
Yeah. So I think that's definitely there, but you can't be relying on this sort of nameless, faceless person to be providing their sort of thoughts on umpiring decisions. I think having someone who's actually recently retired from the game would be a great idea.
Yeah, the game needs it. And the fans need it without knowing that they need it, I think, as well.
Zach Butters, one of the great up-and-coming young stars at Port Adelaide, he was fined again twice on the weekend. We've talked about him before on this podcast over many weeks, but he's become the most fined player in the AFL ever after his 2 new sanctions from round 19. What was your initial reaction to that news?
Big achievement to dethrone Toby with something like that, but
Toby who?
It was, well, obviously... It was one of humour, I think. When you look, I saw the $36,000 come up, and I just thought it's just a lot of money. I don't know if you're in the market for a new car, Matt.
I love $36,000.
I have been recently. You can get a very nice vehicle for $36,000. Look, clearly there's a discipline issue there, and the thing is with someone like Zach, when you do, cop these sanctions so much, your fines actually increase more and more because of your rap sheet. So when you do find yourself in these indiscretions, he's going to be fined more. But that's the issue, right? And I've seen the conversation saying that a set amount of fines sometimes should equal a sort of quota that when you tip over that point, it should equate to maybe a week suspension. The reality is, look, he needs to rein it in because a lot of the times these silly rough conduct charges can be free kicks and probably should be free kicks, but it can cost your side a game, it can cost your side a final. And I'm not going to say that Zach needs to change the way he plays. He's a tough, fiery midfielder, and playing on the edge is okay, I think. But I think the challenge for him now is to not go over that line. And as I said, it's a disciplinary issue, and that's his biggest challenge from here, I think.
Yeah, I probably wasn't humoured by it as much as you were. I think that he's 23 now, and to already have the record all time for fines in the AFL.
17 charges.
Yeah, in that time, I think that's a hard conversation you need to have with one of your good players and just say, what are you doing? This is not good enough, and it's not a great thing for a role model to be doing. And I'm looking through the list of a lot of these fines, and it's rough conduct, it's striking, it's all this sort of stuff where he's clearly obviously been fortunate to not have been rubbed out more.
He deserves
the fines. Quite frankly, he deserves to be rubbed out. If he's going to keep doing grubby little acts on the footy field, just rub him out, because I think that's clearly not enough of a deterrent, the fines, to stop him. And he needs to get better at that, because it's a bit of a blight on the game, to be honest. And I know it's funny, we can sort of laugh at him because he's racked up so many, but for goodness sake, you're a professional footballer. We shouldn't be having this sort of discussion about him and his indiscretions on the footy field every single week.
Fair enough.
I'll take a deep breath, though.
Calm down. You are replacing Jake, aren't you? How can the AFL improve its in-game concussion process after 3 clubs were issued? Please explain from the weekend.
Yeah, interesting week for it. It's a good question too, because you obviously want to get the doctors looking at these guys as soon as possible after they've had a head knock, and sometimes it can take time. And as we learned from the weekend in particular, I think it was the Carlton doctor was busy with something else at the time when it happened.
I think Blake Acres went down in the rooms or something.
Yeah, and so Harry Mackay sort of was lumbering around for a little bit, kicked a goal in the meantime, which is why it's become a bit of news. But there are a couple of things you could do. I mean, we talk about stopping the game for a blood rule. If there are 4 umpires on the field these days, why is it, I think one of them would be able to say, hey, that guy looks a bit groggy on the field. We're just going to stop the play for a little bit. We'll blow the whistle. We'll stop play. We just want to get this guy off first. And that way, the crowd knows, the doctor knows, the clubs know, the players know, and you get a like-for-like replacement. And it's kind of a bit similar to the blood rule, where you sort of wait till everyone gets back into position before you play again. I think that's probably the way to do it, to avoid these moments where you just happen to, I don't know, it gets lost as the play keeps moving. And I know that it would be a bit of a annoyance to maybe players, especially like clubs that have momentum or whatever it might be. But if you're sort of talking about protecting the head and looking after brain injuries and taking them quite seriously, I think stopping the game for sort of 35, 45 a minute to kind of look at these guys and make sure that they are seen as soon as possible isn't a bad trade-off.
I think so. So you're saying extra umpire?
Well, no, I'm saying there are 4 umpires on the field. So
just
if one of them's focused on, a ball up or watching the play, but another one sees that a guy's groggy behind play, whether or not they're concussed, I think you sort of stop and say, let's just get this guy off first. Yeah. And it won't happen that often. I think the argument against might be, but you'll be stopping every fight. I don't think that's true.
No.
You might stop once or twice, and it just helps out the guy who's in the arc, the guy who's stopping, looking at stopping play as well, because they feed to the umpires sometimes. But if the umpire's in a better position, I think that should be made better, that process.
Yep, an extra doctor on the bench, maybe that is independent. I know they're up in the arc potentially, but maybe having one on the grounds as well to help out a club when they are busy with another player, because injuries can happen at any sort of time. Maybe that could aid things as well. But I do like your point. Walshy, that's all we have time for this week. So thanks to you for coming on. I'll see you next week. It'll be the next couple of weeks, me and you. So looking forward to that.
Loving it.
To everyone at home, thanks for listening this week. Don't forget to put your tips in and enjoy the footy.